mean, I have been hearing so much with the Pistons and the trade market. And initially it was in the sense of buying, but I think more now it's going to be not necessarily in the sense of selling, but acquiring, like acquiring assets or players that don't fit where they used to be and where other teams might not have the cap space to take on those types of players. And I think it'll be really interesting seeing all the moves they do because I can tell you there's a lot of things I know. And with that being said, I have zero idea of what to expect for this offseason, right? Like I know of a bunch of different things that have been put out there. I don't really know if any of them are actually going to happen because there's just so much that's been put out there. A lot of it might be smoke, but a lot of it might generally be things that like they're interested in doing. The one thing I can say almost for certain is I'm almost 100% certain the Detroit Pistons will not be picking number 5. I
Oh,
am I think the trade market starts there for the Pistons because if you look at their assets, it sounds to me, and this could change, but it sounds to me like they're really wanting to hold on to the young core. So what assets do you have to trade? You don't have a Boyan anymore to move off of. You don't have an Alec Burks anymore to move off of. What assets do you have to trade? And what does that do for your long-term future? And I think the Pistons like guys in this draft who they think they can get maybe at 10, maybe at 9, maybe at 11, or maybe even at 12, right? With OKC. Memphis, Utah, Chicago, OKC. Those are all names to keep an eye out for when it comes to Detroit Pistons and possibly trading the 5th pick. I mean, Trajan even said it himself during the presser. He goes, yeah, I think he had said something along the lines of like, we have the 5th pick if we do end up picking there. And I think that kind of gives, tips the hat a little bit. Like, I think it's very, 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 very plausible and very likely that they move off of the 5th pick and they might move back to 9, 10. I would specifically, I'm going to say 9 through 12. I could definitely see them picking 9 through 12.
that is something that I've talked about with different people on here. There's a lot of weird discourse with this draft. This is the weirdest draft that I've ever looked at the prospects, and I've looked at teams that like certain teams that want to trade up in the top 5 make no sense. Like I saw a report that Miami and the Lakers wanted to trade up in the top 5. I'm like, why? Like it's so weird to gauge, but it doesn't surprise me for the Pistons because like you mentioned, maybe they like a guy around that 10 to 12 range. And they could get him and maybe get an asset, maybe get a future draft pick. I think that would be more appealing for me as a fan to get a little bit something and you don't have to pay the salary as high because you're trading a little bit out of the lottery or staying in the lottery.
It's interesting because like you take into account the fact that they have a cap expert on their team now, right? Someone who's renowned around the league for being really good at managing the cap. And something as simple as a rookie contract does change with every single pick. So, like I said earlier, if you believe in someone like Cody Williams and you may want to take him at 5, but you also have the knowledge to know that other teams from, I don't know, 5 to 9 might not pick Cody Williams and you can get an asset for taking, for moving back, you go and do that and you can still get the guy you want. And I think this is a draft where, and I think it's honestly it is a weird draft, but it's also a really fascinating draft because there is no consensus top 5, top 10, there is no real consensus. So everybody has to come to their own conclusions. And with teams having all their different scouting departments, different needs, et cetera, teams are going to come to a lot of different conclusions and are going to value players differently and might think this player is worth this pick and might think they need to move to a specific pick to get that player. Like, let's say, I don't know, Chicago loves, Matas Buzelis. They know the Pistons at 5 have interest in Matas. The Pistons might like Matas, but they might not love Matas to the point where, okay, we can go to 11 and still get someone who we also really like. Maybe a Jacoby Walter, maybe I'm not gonna say his name, but Saloon. I think his last name is Saloon or Saloon. Salaun. Yeah, there you go. Saloon. Maybe they like him and they think, okay, well, we can move back and get him, and we think he's maybe on the same level as a Matas, right? Or a Ron Holland. There's just a lot of variation when it comes to this draft, and I think it's going to be a draft that has a lot of movement for sure.
Just saw a comment. Did you see they did like this draft thing with Matas, and he couldn't name who the first overall pick was. He's like, what year was the Jalen Green draft again? I was just like, yeah. Pistons fans like, hey, like, no, I'm good.
It's tough. It's tough, man, because I like Matas. I think people are looking at the shooting from his time in the G League and taking that at face value. But if you look before that, in high school, he shot the ball excellent. He might have just had a rough year at shooting, because that's kind of a really big jump going from high school to NBA 3-point line. Because that's what it is in the G League is the NBA 3-point line. So I think Matas is a good prospect, but I think with Pistons fans, they're really fixated on two things now, which is one, I guess three: Arn-Tellem connection, the shooting splits, and now the Jalen Green comment, right? Where he goes, oh, it was the Jalen Green draft. If I have a pro tip for any prospect out there, if you are a high school basketball player who knows they're going to go pro and you don't want to go to Detroit, say something really positive about anybody else in the 2021 NBA draft class. And I promise you won't have to worry about going to Detroit. Because the fan base, I will say, for as bad as this team is, will live and die by Cade Cunningham. So I hope if Matas does get selected here, he has a comment where he's gonna make up for that, because they don't play about Cade here.
No. I think he said, like, if you would have said, like, it would have been crazy if you would have said like the Franz Wagner draft. Like, I couldn't imagine like Twitter today, because that just would have been like wild. But Amin and Asar like literally named everyone in their draft class from 1 to 30. It just kind of tells you like what kind of basketball sickos those guys are.
It's interesting because with Matas, I know I was watching his interview with Kevin O'Connor, and I think he said he didn't start watching basketball like really closely until high school. So there might just honestly be a lot of like missed things with his knowledge of the NBA. So I can't fault him too much, but I mean, everybody knows it was Cade and them. So